started, I want to welcome everybody here and at home and in their offices to a really special evening tonight, and very important for NYU and for public relations people and students and practitioners everywhere. 100 years ago, Edward Bernays taught the first class in public relations, where? At NYU. And what I found out about, so it's a very important part of our history, what I found out about in preparing for this is I was talking to the faculty advisor for the Public Relations League. So I know many of you are members of the Public Relations League, and if you're not, y'all should be. And he said that when he was a student at NYU, he reached out to Edward Bernays in '89, and he needed help with some kind of question he had for class, or essay, something that he was doing. And so he wrote a letter, because that's how things went, like in the mail. You don't know what that is, when you try to like click an envelope and put a stamp on things. And so didn't hear anything. Then he got a letter back. And the letter was from Bernays in January of '89, and it said, "Why don't you call me, collect, at this number." Collect means he's gonna pay for it. "I'll be able to answer your questions that you wrote. I think that way I'll be able to give you a fuller answer." I'm so glad to do this because NYU was the university where, in 1923, I taught the first class in public relations. Sincerely, Edward Bernays. And this is framed on his office wall. And the reason why I bring this up is because Edward Bernays was an author, a scholar, a teacher, but he was 100% for students. That's the kind of faculty you have here. It's the kind of place you have landed in. That's the kind of degree you're getting. Where a professor will say, "You call me, but I'll pay for it." And we can spend all the time that you need talking about something that's important to you. And by the way, I taught the first class, like, you know, whatever, it's a sidebar. But we're here to celebrate him, and we're celebrating the accomplishments, and we're really here to celebrate students. So thank you for joining us tonight.
So we're gonna get to the cake in just a minute. This is my favorite part of the program because you get to participate. We have an incredible panel of speakers here tonight, and it's our chance to hear their thoughts about the last 100 years of PR.
Hey, I wasn't here that long.
And what we think will be happening in the future for our professions. So I wanted to take a minute to introduce our panel. Before I do, I will say they all love questions. So think of your very best question during the panel. You'll get a chance to ask those questions. And if you're joining us virtually, put your questions in the Q&A feature, and we'll be able to ask them of our panelists. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our moderator, Professor Stephanie Mattera, who's joined us. We were thrilled that she's here. Stephanie has been doing amazing things at NYU. She's also an alum of our program, so hooray. And prior to education, Stephanie was involved in a number of lifestyle brands. And as you might tell from her very fashionable attire, worked for some designers, and we're really excited to hear what she has to say. When we finish the panel and the Q&A, we have a reception. So I'm going to give you a cheat sheet for what to ask each of our panelists about. Talk to Stephanie about her charitable work. So our next speaker is someone I'm particularly delighted to have as a guest. And I'm particularly excited because he's usually the one asking questions of others. So we're turning the tables on none other than Gideon Filzai from PRWeek. He's been there for 2 decades. He's done incredible things, and he has their custom content, many of their special projects. He's got an amazing view into the world of PR. And at the reception, ask him about his sons and co-workers. You'll find out some really interesting things. Our next panelist I want to introduce is Bettina Garibaldi, who is also an alum of our program. She is a seasoned PR pro and has worked with some incredible brands during her career. And during the reception, they asked her about the motto. Her personal motto is a really, really terrific one. Our next panelist is none other than Shelley Spector, who's really a legend in our industry. I don't know that you need much of an introduction, but you've done just incredible things, both running your own firm, which you founded in, I think, the early 90s. But she's also the amazing force behind the Museum of PR. So we are super, super excited to have you. And the hat here, ask about the Museum of PR and the cool things that they're doing when you see Shelley at the reception. And then our last speaker joined us virtually, Casey Myers. Thank you so much for joining us. Casey is an incredible window into communications. He is head of the Virginia Tech Communications Program, where he's also a professor. And Casey has a lot of background and experience in government affairs. He is a very established author. And in fact, that's the hack. I would love for you to ask him about all the articles and the items that have put him onto the newscasts and on some very notable programs. So Casey, thank you for joining us virtually.
Thank you.
Terrific. So again, remember, you've got an opportunity to participate. Think of your best questions. And Stephanie, let me turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Catherine. Thank you for joining us tonight for this discussion. I'm going to start with Shelley. So Shelley Spector knew Edward Bernays personally. So there's actually 1 degree of separation between all of us in this room and Edward Bernays, so it's pretty spectacular. He passed away in 1995 at the frightful age of 103. So you knew him for quite a period of time. I know there's probably a longer story, but what's the 90-second elevator version of how you met Edward Bernays?
Okay, so in 1985, I was giving seminars called Creative Strategies for PR Programs at the Doral Hotel. I walked by and there was Bernays himself at age 94 giving a seminar he called 2 Days with Edward L. Bernays. And after my class was over, I went to the hallway and bumped into him. He asked me out to dinner that night at the Waldorf. Long story short, he was known as a womanizer back then. So these stories were all in the
He
wires.
was not my hero.
Okay.
For
So,
that.
and I said, can I go on a date? I bring somebody who I had just met, Barry, the previous Sunday, and asked him to come. And he was fascinated with the fact that Bernays was the double nephew Sigmund Freud, and among other things, and that he knew Thomas Edison and all the presidents from back then, and Eleanor Roosevelt, et cetera, et cetera. And that started a 10-year friendship with Bernays, and Barry and I engaged, got married, started having kids, but throughout we went 3 to 4 times a year to his house to do all those series. And I just want to mention that this was the textbook that he wrote, so his class at NYU, 1923, would have a textbook. So he wrote this right before he gave the class. This is a 1927 version of the book, the 3rd edition. And the museum is now publishing the 100th anniversary edition. And I'm proud to say that Casey, Casey is one of the essayists for the book. We have 12 essayists and he is the essayist.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And so we know that Edward Bernays had developed theories to help shape, consumer behavior and perception, and learned techniques, right, from his double uncle, Sigmund Freud. So what would Edward Bernays think about public relations today and how it's being practiced?
Well, he would say he would recognize a lot of it. He would say we're putting too much attention on social media because he would look at it in a real short form and kind of transactional. And of course, it wasn't around when he was around. He barely even had a color TV. When I asked him if he had a VHS, I don't even know what that was. So that's how far back he goes. He grew up in the age of newspapers and newsreels, and we really had to make news. And this is a concept that very much in this what Crystalline talks about, the ability for PR Pro to make news. And this, when I was coming into the field, this is what was so important to all of us. So he would feel if he went into a classroom today, the fact that news is not discussed as much as what we do would be disappointing to him.
Thank you for sharing that. So I'll open this up to the group and maybe I'll start with Gideon first. What would be your perspective if this was, Bernays is here today and this was his perspective, what would you say as a counterpoint to that opinion?
I would say that social media is absolutely necessary for communication. Look, it's necessary for our lives. Can you imagine your lives without social media? I'm a lot older than everyone in this room pretty much, and I can't even imagine it without it. So it just gives you the opportunity to reach more people, right? Organically. That's what communicators do, right? They don't pay to reach out to people. They have to do it creatively. And social media gives you a wonderful opportunity. I would like to think that Mr. Bernays probably would appreciate the evolution.
Of course.
I'm sure he would have. Now, listen, over the course of this conversation, I'm sure one of the things you're going to hear from me a lot is, and I'm very, very happy if any of you say that I'm wrong about this, but lamenting the lack of some very, very basic skills that are still crucial to public relations, writing, dealing with people face to face. So these things are, even in today's age, listen, I love technology just as much as the next person, but there are certain things you just kind of have to do for yourself. And obviously we'll probably get to AI a little bit too. But just to go back to what you're asking, social media is just something that has frankly allowed communicators to gain the place in the C-suite that they've been chasing for so long. And I don't know if that would be possible. I don't know if that would be possible without social media.
Yes. So I'm going to pivot to Bettina with an illustrious career in the agency world. How often were you using social media just to even reach reporters and share pitches versus using traditional email pitches or?
So daily. So my background is I've been a kitchen for about 15 years, kitchen school, local firm. And then I did Dr. Shanwick. I've been around the babies for a while, kitchen for a long stint. And I would say that social media is now Twitter, now X, whatever it's called now, it's following those editors and writers and really looking at what they're writing about and sliding into their DMs, right? And instead of your traditional email that you send, I think it has evolved with the times and you have to embrace it. There's no other choice. Press releases are fantastic. Put them on the wire and they're great for SEO and other things. But social media or bringing that within your relation strategies for
Absolutely. So how have we really addressed that, do you feel, in education, in the educational space, to make sure that students are really prepared for what they're going to do?
Sure. I think I'm a graduate from years. It's been even a while since then. And courses that I was taught. Of course, I learned about history, theory, and a lot of things that social media was evolving then, but now curriculum, I'm sure, has evolved dramatically. And I would say that it's all about embracing that digital transformation and ensuring that classes such as social media or content marketing or writing as a core foundation for different types of writing, right? You have press release writing, that's way different than a caption for something that you're promoting on your Instagram page on behalf of the brand. So I think the evolution of the types of communication tools that you have
Thank you so much. So talking a little bit about AI, so just across the board, everyone can kind of just say how they feel AI is going to support what they're doing in their field at this time.
Yeah, sure.
Want to start, Shelley?
I don't know that much about AI, but I have used it and I think it's fantastic from what I've seen. And I don't know enough about it to be scared of that.
Yeah.
It's another tool, but
Yes.
primarily it's another tool. But I find I'm always astounded by when I type stuff in prompts, how quickly, before I get my fingers over the keys, it already has an answer.
Yes.
I just hope that students don't use it in place of their own brains.
I'll just add to that, I think students nowadays more than ever, the whole mental component of doing what you practice every day should be front and center. AI, I think is a tremendous tool as a starting point, use ideas, and of course, wording it in a way. There are AI tools, and it's tell if something was created with an AI tool, so it's so smart that even that has erupted, right? So I think there will be continuous technology that is evolving to ensure that it's being used the right way.
Thanks. I'm going to go to Casey. So Casey, I know you're, a distinguished author, professor. You are published in many of the top tier publications around the nation and the world, but you also have access to academia in your role. And so how do you see AI being embraced in public relations education specifically?
So AI is a 100% fundamental skill that people have to use and learn. It's a skill though, and it's a tool. It's not a replacement for thought processes. So I think about so to take it back to Bernays. So Bernays was a big thinker. He didn't dwell on technician level work. He thought about strategy at a global level. And so what I think he would say is, if he were looking at 2023, he would say, we're too technologically focused. We need to level way up into this sort of big thoughts about social scientific psychographic research about how audiences process information. I mean, if you read Crystallizing, I reread it when I wrote the intro for Shelley, and I thought at the time, I said, well, this is going to be a kind of a dated book, and it's so topical. It could be written now, and people would read it, and it would have resonance for them, because he's talking about how to do good PR and change attitude and behavior. So if that involves AI, if that involves social, if that involves press releases, and that involves newspaper reels, whatever, he would be in favor of that. But he would say, you got to start with a strategy. Now, in terms of training, I think that what we have to do is, there's all this fear around AI in the job market. So PR people think, well, AI is going to take my job. Well, I don't think that's the case. I think that the PR person is liberated by AI in a lot of ways to do bigger level work instead of focusing on the menial. And so if we're able to kind of harness the knowledge of AI with the knowledge of PR, I think it makes for a stronger profession. And I also think in one of these I was talking about this in the class today at another university, if AI doesn't think like a human, it thinks like an algorithm. And so moments of inspiration, going to an event like this and talking with people during the networking session, sitting down and thinking something through and ruminating over it, it doesn't do that. We do that. And that makes us better thinkers and producers of content. And so AI is going to think a certain way, in a linear algorithmic way, and it's going to produce content, but we provide the context and the strategy. And as PR professionals, as people training the next generation, we got to have that skill set, just like we had to have the skill set of social and getting on the internet and all the new things that come about with technological innovation, but the core skills remain the same. And so to tie it back in, this 100th anniversary, and I was thinking today, so Bernays is quite relevant. I don't know that they'll be celebrating 100 years from now a class that I taught anywhere, but but we're celebrating him because he's so relevant to the field, and what he said is so important. And so I think that for him, looking at that strategy, looking at that big picture, and leveling up, I think that's what Bernays would tell us to do.
Thank you so much. So talking from the journalistic perspective, how do you embrace AI? And do you recognize any kind of AI conceptualized pitches and press releases, or do you feel like it's kind of just kind of blends with what we've already been doing in terms of the tactical approach?
Well, first of all, this is the side, one thing I will say is,
Yes.
again, usually I'm the questioner, not the questioner. And it's interesting now, whenever I have like a 4-person panel, now I know what the 4th person feels like. Everyone said something really smart, and you're like, what the hell am I supposed to say? But, okay, look, I mean, if I may just go back to what we were
Yeah,
talking
please,
about.
sure.
Sort of playing off of what Casey said, I do a lot of surveys, and we ask about AI all the time. I would say 2 or 3 years ago, the fear of AI taking PR's job was pretty apparent. That's not really the question anymore. I mean, most of them realize that it's not, because I think the truth is, you're not gonna lose your job to AI, you're gonna lose your job to someone who knows how to use AI better than you do. That's what you have to think about. And, in my role, I get to convene a lot of groups of some of the top communicators in the industry. And, you know, they talk about the future all the time. They talk about you guys all the time, and, you know, helping you guys out, eventually taking their roles is something they're actually very excited about. And when it comes to AI, here's the thing. It is so easy to let AI, ChatGPT, but it's obviously other tools, write a press release for you, write a speech for you. It can produce something that you can actually use. I wouldn't recommend it, because, you know, AI actually doesn't think at all. It just spits out information that's gathered from all over the internet and all over everywhere. It's not thinking. It certainly doesn't understand people's feelings, doesn't understand context. It's a lot of things it doesn't understand. So when I advise people, if I'm ever in a position to advise about AI, it's that, you know what? If you're, a lot of times when you start a project, it's like a blank page. AI is great for blank pages. It can give you ideas, and the better you prompt it, the better ideas it will give you. But what I would recommend is, and I'm actually gonna ask all of you a question, because I know you're gonna screw me later and ask me questions, but so I'm gonna ask you a question now. How many of you would consider yourselves like good actual writers? Raise your hand. Wow, you're either really honest or really modest. Okay, I'll say you're honest. Okay, good. I'm gonna ask you to do something, not now, but just think about it. It is very, while AI can help you craft a press release or something similar to that, it's really important that you actually go through the process manually and do it yourselves. And the reason that's important is because it will force you to think about every single word that you're writing. What the goal is, where applicable, what the audience you're trying to go after is. If it's a press, if it's something you're trying to get to a journalist, you have to understand, trying to think about what would interest that journalist, and what would stand out from the thousands of other pitches he or she is getting. It's gonna take a little bit longer, surely, but I mean, the whole process of doing that is just so helpful to you. It will enable you, if you have those basic skills, if you're a good writer, AI can do so much more for you than if you're not a good writer, okay? And I just think that's really important. AI is a wonderful tool. Just don't use it as a crutch. And I don't even think I answered your question about the journalist part, did I?
In some ways you did, but
Okay.
how do you use it maybe then?
Okay.
Maybe that's the part.
Okay, you know what, actually, I use it as a time saver,
Okay.
where it's applicable.
Right.
For example, despite how I'm performing now, I'm on podcasts a lot, I'm on webcasts a lot, I'm on stage a lot. You know, you're always, I never use it to think about questions I want to ask a speaker. I never do that, because I need to go through that process myself, okay? But, honestly, to write that 30 to 60 second closing segment of a speech, that I might go to ChatGPT and say, listen, I'm speaking to these people, or in these, I'm getting better at prompt writing, so, so then, and AI will, like, I'll give you a perfect example. I was like 10 minutes from starting a webcast, and I'm like, oh my God, I need to write my script. I script everything. So I knew what questions I wanted to ask, but I'm like, oh my God, I have to have the opening to close. So I kind of asked AI, listen, these are my speakers, this is what I'm doing, write me an opening and close for this webcast. And it did it in like literally 30 seconds. It's crazy. And it was actually decent. Again, the opening and the close is not something anyone attending the webcast is really paying attention to. So I'm like, that is something I'm okay sort of using AI for. So again, AI, you kind of have to figure out what you can take. I hate to use the word shortcuts, but it's kind of like that. You kind of have to figure out what you can use as a shortcut, and AI is great for that. But for anything substantial, I do speak English, this is my first language. So that's where AI is great for idea generation, but do not rely on its writing for you, because I promise you, if you really sat down and thought about it, you can do a much better job writing anything that AI can. Okay?
So the key takeaway is it's a tool, right? It's not a substitution for higher level thinking or strategy, right? Great. So we're gonna pivot to public relations, back to what Edward Bernays really made it famous for. He's associated with the women's rights movement through his famous campaign, The Torches of Freedom, right? It was really for his client, Lucky Strike cigarettes. In his defense, he didn't know that cigarettes are bad for health back then. But it was about 10 years after women gained the right to vote. And so women's suffrage was really a social issue at the time. So now, we're thinking about the era that we're in, and there's many social issues, probably too many to name. But how could public relations play a role in helping advance social issues and the public consciousness to take action and make a difference?
Well, that's a great question, because you look at Bernays' life, and he would tie his campaigns into various social issues at the time. Not only because he cared about those issues, which he did many of them, but because he could make news that way.
Right.
So great, if women's rights were on the front page and he has Torches of Freedom, people were gonna write about that because it makes sense. And Bernays was very good at understanding basically the major point to take away from this book or Bernays' life is that you've got to understand the public's first. Who's your audiences? Who do you need to reach? Who do you prioritize out there? That's why when I said before about social media, I really meant just technology. I really meant that we go about it these days in kind of reverse.
Yes.
What Bernays would do, because he's the double nephew of Sigmund Freud, is analyze what's the motivations, what's the subconscious, what's the behaviors, what are the triggers of these publics that we have to reach, right? What do we want them to do? How do we get there? And then use the channels, whatever channels are available to you, right? And social media is but a channel. I do want to interrupt myself and tell you a little story about another pioneer in public relations, Harold Person.
Yes.
And one day, Harold came in to talk to my class in Peru. Oh, I think my friend. And the class asked Harold then was pretty young. And he said, Harold, what do you think of social media? He said, I'm so sick of this question. He said, social media is just another channel. In the same way that television was another channel, like newsreels was another channel, radio was another channel, newspapers was another channel. So he looked, it's a great channel. It's stuff out there immediately. It's wonderful, but it's just another channel. What Bernays' focus always on is the public and who do you have to reach and what do you want to do. So in parentheses about this channel thing, I found online the 1961 PRSA conference, a weekend conference, all about what do we do with television? What is the PR industry going to do with this thing about television? How do we deal with it? And how do you get placements on the air? Do you make films? I mean, they weren't even talking video, but it was way behind. you take films and send it to the networks. I mean, so it was a whole weekend conference about this new thing called today. Right, and really puts it in perspective, because you know that there were similar conferences about what do you do with this thing called Facebook, Twitter.
And now we're saying about AI.
And now we're saying about
Yeah.
AI, so it's, advancements will come along the way, but I think that what Bernays would tell us is focus on the public first.
Thank you for that. I'm gonna go to Casey. You are a historian, right? Shelley has shared that with us, and so I'm curious to hear your perspective too on Bernays' contribution to social issues and how we're seeing that in play now.
So Bernays was a polymath. He knew a lot about a lot of different things. And he was a progressive minded person. I think that he would have probably been very pro DEI. I think that he would have been a person today very at comfort with the idea of social values being articulated by organizations. The other thing I think about is that he was very much into the idea that thought leadership, it was important. So unlike today or segments of society where you have a very anti-intellectual strain of thought, Bernays believed that intellectuals should have a voice within society in a large way to shape public opinion for the betterment. And so like, we would call that thought leadership. He didn't call it that at that time because that term didn't exist, but that was very much his attitude. And so you see Bernays working on things like Torches of Freedom. He works on things for businesses like bacon and eggs, but he also worked on things like global policy and ratification of the UN. And I remember writing a book about the work of Edward Bernays. It was a retrospective history of PR. And I got a brochure that was written by Bernays about how you should go to your congressman and tell him to join the UN and how the UN was extremely important because we needed to live in a kind of a international law-driven society. So, I mean, that was his attitude. And I think that one of the things that he did very well was that he supported a lot of causes and he supported a lot of progressive ideas in a way that had resonance with audiences. And so I think for him today, I think he would be very much at home in a lot of these conversations. I think he would be disappointed about how experts are discounted, because I think that he really believed in kind of the technocratic expertise was good in shaping public opinion, and that was actually a force to have society evolve in a better way for there to be actual achievements in society for the betterment of mankind. So I think that would be his approach to today. But I think that we have a lot to kind of learn from a lot of his writings about that as well, considering that he also, being in that kind of psychology realm, he looked at individual psychology, group psychology, to see how to get resonance of those messages, depending on whatever format or platform, whatever. So I think, like what Shelley was saying, the tool of social media would have been something he would have been okay with, but he wouldn't have focused on the tool. He would have focused on the overall message.
Great. And in academia, we really are thought leaders, and we are, shaping the next generation, and we're also learning from them simultaneously. I'm curious, all of you, and I'll start with Casey. What are the best resources do you think we should, send students to? Industry organizations, research-based organizations, conferences, and other sources where they can really see what is the thought leadership that's out there right now and identify the trends and where we're headed.
Starting with me?
I'll start with you, if that's okay, Casey.
Sure. So what I make all of my students get on the free subscriptions that our university provides them to outlets like the New York Times and other things. I think what we see in a kind of a younger generation is a lot of information is gained through things like social, which is not bad. I mean, you should be on social. There's a lot of stuff there, but I think that there's a kind of a lack of interest in news, from kind of formalized news. And so I always try to get our students to lean into the actual news programs, news sites, whether it be the Times or whether it be The Economist or whatever you're reading, and to just get to be aware of current events and understand the context of those events. I think that's very important. Another thing for PR students, I think, is to lean into the trades, because the trade presses, we don't have a lot of, you see a lot of discussion around that in the industry, but not in academia. We focus on like scholarly journals, and those have their place, and scholarly books, they have their place too. But I think the trades are very important to kind of understand your career, your profession, and then read whatever you can get your hands on that's good. Because I think when we're talking about PR being good writers and good thinkers, you have to read a lot. You have to process a lot of information. You have to know a lot about a lot of different things. And so if you're just, you're part of kind of the culture of today and understanding what's going on in the world and the context behind it, you're far ahead most people, I think, in the communications industry. So that's a good way to kind of set up and prepare to be a good PR practitioner, but also just sort of good citizen.
I'm going to go to Bettina next. So being in the agency world and being in practice, what are the trade organizations that you really turn to?
Sure. But I would agree, trades absolutely within the discipline of public relations. But also, I would add beyond public relations too, right? From a discipline perspective. Because understanding the full marketing mix will give you such an upper edge, whether to work on the brand side in-house at a company, or whether to work in an agency that works with different companies and clients. I've been on a lot of teams and worked on campaigns that are interdisciplinary, and really understanding how it all works together is also, I think, something very important. Because you could be thrown in a room with the advertising agency and this agency, this APR, and you really need to understand the full picture as well, right? Because nowadays things aren't so siloed. If they're done well, they're done in conjunction with the entire marketing mix. So I would recommend, yes, absolutely, the public relations trades like PRWeek, et cetera, but then what are other outlets? There's a LinkedIn group called Public Relations and Communications Professionals, right? Just join that. There's a lot of things that you can come across. But then also industries that you're interested in. So say that you're very passionate about the retail industry or the food industry. Make sure that you are signed up to newsletters about news. To Casey's point about staying in the know about what's happening within that industry. So we're talking discipline, just marketing discipline, PR, whatever, but then the actual industry. And that's what I've done to kind of stay abreast of everything. You know, if you're into tech, South by Southwest is a great, for example, conference, and they offer a lot of very valuable educational things that they push out. So I feel like it's to best prepare yourself for this next era of marketing. There are a lot of fine lines. There are a lot of work lines. It's obviously understanding our craft really, really well and the power that PR does have, because quite frankly, not to be biased, it is the strongest of the entire marketing mix, right? Because it's not paid, and we all know what PR is. But it's understanding the full picture and how the others work as well will give you that range.
Shelley, Gideon, would you like to add anything here?
Were you asking about trade publications or trade organizations?
Also trade organizations, I don't think we've really touched on that fully.
Okay. Well, we were just talking about setting up a PRSSA chapter here.
Yeah.
Very, very important.
Yeah.
And for a million obvious reasons.
Right.
For networking, just getting to know people around the country, participating in debatement competitions.
Yes.
You know, it's just, it's easy to do. And then of course, you know, once you're in the professional lab, you can apply to be a page. You know, page is the, you know, organization that's, you know, I've been a page member since 1998, and I probably wouldn't make it into the page today. But it's really a fabulous organization. And there are others that are good. And I agree with your point about the clients who serve their trade association. So if you're working for a builder, go to the join up with trade associations for the building industries or cosmetics, whatever it is.
Yes,
But trade associations are very, very important.
absolutely.
Yeah, yeah, I was thinking about this before, and, I want to take it from a little bit. One thing that I've learned in my many years in PR is that, people who have reached the top levels of this industry, the CCOs and agency leaders, are incredibly giving. They really preparing the next generation. I think I said this before, preparing the next generation is really important. And I will tell you, if you do a little research and just find any of the myriad industry leaders who probably graduated from this very school, whether it was undergrad or more so, I promise you, if you ever just reached out to them and just wanted to talk about anything, they would. Okay? And so the other thing I want to say, and this is probably not something you would expect to hear this question. Executive recruiters. They are incredible bastions of knowledge about what the people who hire them are looking for in the roles. Now, granted, a lot of them are a little bit more focused on senior level, but that doesn't mean they won't talk to you. I will tell you that I'm gonna throw a name out there. He's actually retired. Bill Heyman.
Well, he said enough of
Bill Heyman is, other than the fact that he's a Yankee fan, he's perfect.
it. He's without equal.
Yeah, I would agree. There are other great ones, no question, but Bill Heyman is amazing. He's gonna have more time in his hands now, because he's retired. But I'll tell you, I have so many times young professionals have reached out to me. By the way, I do also want to say this. Anyone in this room, I know a lot of people. If not that Shelley, no, but seriously, if anyone wants to reach out to me, by all means, please do. Okay, I just, what little I can help the youth of the world, I'm happy to do it. But going back to Bill, executive recruiters are just really happy to talk to young professionals. Also, probably maybe down the road they'll work with them, which is also helpful to them, but they know exactly what brands are looking for their communicators. And they are fairly they're not fairly, they're pretty unbiased about it too, I mean, right? So I just think that this industry is just full, and people who kind of work with it are just full of not only knowledge, but desire to impart that. So yeah, read the trades. I wasn't gonna say PRWeek, I'm glad you did. There are others that are just fine. I'm not gonna name them because I can see my editor ready to kill me. That's fine too. But seriously, there's a lot of people who you can really just talk to, and you can learn so much. And if any of you, if I can help any of you connect with them, happy to do it.
Thank you so much, appreciate that gracious offer. And so Bettina, we were in the program at the same time, right? You graduated 1 year ahead of me, and you had a great opportunity to come through the program. Would you want to share that with students?
Yes, absolutely. So Mary Bradford at the time was an adjunct professor. She was the CEO of my company. And through her established a relationship, that's how I put in the door I catch at the time. So I carved out some sort of apprenticeship, fellowship sort of project, and did that with great pleasure at the time. So what I do appreciate a lot about the program was not only are you learning about the theory, the practice, and the history, et cetera, but we're also learning from practitioners that do this day in and out. Gary is a great example of that, and people like her and others that are willing to give their time. Sure, there's a little paycheck that comes with it, but it's not about that. It really isn't. It's very fulfilling to me to kind of share the actual practice of it, and real time cases and experiences that you'll get to experience once you do start practicing. So I'll forever be thankful for that. And we remain in touch to this day. It's fantastic. She's been a great mentor.
Fantastic. So I'm gonna start with Shelley and then go to Casey. So what advice do you have for today's public relations students preparing for a job and landing their first role in public relations?
I think it's very important, I think Casey referred to it earlier, is to stay on top of the news. When I first started working, which was a couple of decades ago, maybe more than a couple of decades, we didn't have phones to get the newsroom. We had real newspapers, long newspapers, and you had to learn how to fold the newspaper, because back then it was pretty large. And in my first class that I ever taught here, that was part of the midterm, was to learn how to fold a newspaper at a certain period of time.
Aren't you glad you don't have to do that?
But I also gave news quizzes every week.
Wow.
Yeah, and then, and wherever I teach, I give news quizzes.
Good.
I love writing a lot.
Yes.
It's very selfish of me, because I enjoy writing multiple choice questions, but it's vital. I just don't understand how you can be in this profession and not love the news.
Right.
And there's so many reasons why you should be a news junkie. Not just with the newspaper, but also with TV. TV and radio news. But I think that being a writer, being a versatile writer, is really important. In your day, and I'm sure you can attest to, you can write 14 different kinds of things during the course of the day. Right? You can write a news editor, a page from an annual report, a client memo. There's just so many things that we're called upon to write well, to write fast.
Yes.
And what's as important as anything else is knowing how to communicate with clients, to explain to them why you're late with this thing, or what, right? There's just so many emails and ways that we can communicate with our clients and with our leadership. So I think that being a facile, versatile writer is extremely important. And if you don't like to write now, try to learn how to like to write, because this is something that you just do. I hate to say back in that day, but when I started working here in 2008, most other adjuncts, except for Barry, were journalists at one point. You couldn't get a degree in PR back then, right?
Right.
You got a J degree, short for journalism.
Right.
So we all knew how to write news. And writing is and understanding what makes news is just really the most important thing about PR.
It's fundamental.
It is.
Right.
Totally.
Right.
I think another skill that people have to acquire while they're in school, and I know that Atlanta's a great program in this, is crisis and counseling and crisis counseling.
Yes.
Because our clients will go through a crisis, at least one crisis a year, and you have to understand the business from their point of view, be able to counsel them in their respect. It doesn't come naturally to a lot of people to be sitting across the room from somebody, giving him what he wants it. He wants it from you in the same way that you want it from a doctor or from a lawyer. You have to look at that positioning as something that's required for your own success in this business.
Fantastic. We're about 5 minutes out from close, so Casey, just 1 minute for your comments, and then we're going to move to just take 1 or 2 questions from the audience.
Sure thing. Just real quickly, I would say 3 things to take advantage of. 1, get out of your comfort zone and take a class outside of PR communication, get some perspective from another vantage point. That'll be very valuable to you. 2, get out of the classroom and get into an internship and have that experience, because that's a learning experience that the classroom cannot replicate at all. You working with other people, being in that environment is an invaluable asset. The 3rd thing, and this may sound strange, but it's true, and I hear this a lot, soft skills are very important. So I one time was at a postdoc and was talking to young professionals. I said, what's the one thing that you wish that you had learned in college, but you didn't? And like half of them said something like how to answer the phone and how to take notes in a meeting or so. And I was going like, well, I couldn't teach a class on that, but like that's kind of an acquired thing. And our technology sometimes dilutes that ability. So having the ability to just talk, having the ability to engage with people is important. And so, developing those skills is something that takes time, and it's also something that's very experiential. It's not something that can be taught from a textbook or from a webinar. So those are the three things I would tell students today. If you can kind of do those three while you're in school, develop those three aspects of your career, you will be ahead of the game.
You're all well positioned for that at the School of Professional Studies and the Division of Programs and Business. Just want to say thank you to our panelists and open it up to at least one or two questions from the group. Yes, please.
Thank you for being here. I have a question. I know you touched a lot on AI technology. My question is about AI. It's new and it was introduced. We don't know a lot about it. I agree that it gives it does give you a lot of suggestions when you want to start something. Now my question is that when internet came into our homes in like mid-1990s, we had a dial-tone, right? It was very slow. But if someone would have told you 20 years later that the internet is going to be like the speed of light, I would say maybe not so true. So what does that mean? That means the technology improved a lot. Now, do you still see AI as a threat? Because AI just came in, and I'm sure you cannot ignore technology. Technology is just going to improve. It's not going to stay the way it is today. I'm talking about AI. Do you see AI as a threat in the future for your professionals?
Okay. I'm gonna make a reference actually that I hope you all get. But when I think it's funny. Well, first of all, AI has been around for a long time. What we're really talking about is generative AI, right? And then the next step would be cognitive AI. Cognitive AI is where you're starting to actually get the technology to actually start thinking, presumably like you. And then it gets a little scary, but how many? I'm sure people in this panel might be familiar with this, but I can't believe I'm referencing this. But how many of you are familiar with the movie iRobot? Okay. Yeah, the guy who beat the crap out of Chris Rock, right? Yeah. Okay. It's really funny because that robot Sonny is, I think, what everyone is kind of scared about, right? Because that robot was practically human. It felt, it dreamt, it think. It's like that I think is the ultimate fear of what people are like. Oh my God! If AI becomes that, then what are we doing there? Here's the thing though. And communications is really well positioned in this regard. There is still a level of intuition, and I dare I use the word gut.
Yes.
That it's years of experience that all of you will get. Really becomes really important in this. And more and more CEOs, for a long time, one of the biggest challenges governments had was getting that seat at the table, actually having the CEO care about what you have to say, but actually having your CEO bring in the communicator when there wasn't a problem going on, actually wanting their counsel. And it's gotten a lot better. And I just think that AI will never be able to replace humans in terms of intuition, context, because you know what? No two crises are the same, no two situations are the same. There are so many external factors that you have to think about in every single situation. And AI, in some ways, AI is very linear in how it thinks and churns out information. I have a really, listen, I could be wrong, but I have a really hard time seeing AI developing to the point where it's gonna think like a human and feel like a human and have the gut of a human. AI is not going to replace public relations. I'm telling you that right now. If I'm wrong, you can say Gideon didn't know what he was talking about. I just really don't see that happening. Like all of us said before, it's just that, the speed, it's gonna get faster, it's gonna be able to provide with more ideas. And it's just something that PR pros are actually just gonna be able to use, to make themselves even better at their jobs. Very much appreciate the question, but again, I don't think, look, did the internet make people obsolete? Right?
I think it took the pen industry out of business, not out of business, but
I'm sorry, the what?
the pen and pencil industry, because nobody used pen and pencil no more.
You know what?
Technology.
I think people still do them. People still,
I'm not saying.
Yesterday.
people still read books, right? You guys still actually read the physical books, right? Right? So,
E-books, yeah.
Wow, I feel, okay.
So we're actually out of time, but we can continue this conversation in our reception, right? So you can have that one-on-one experience with our speakers. But thank you for the robust question and the robust answer. So thank you so much, everyone, for coming. We really appreciate it. To everyone online, thank you for joining. There will be a recording available after this event. And thank you, Casey, for joining us remotely. We really appreciate it.
Wish that I could be there in person. I like cake and champagne. Is the next person. So.
Well, thank you so much.